How's everyone doing? We are here for yet another Rising Tide Talk. I am Clay Powell, co-founder and lead designer at Nat2 Press, but you may recognize me as your local mod and beginning to become recurring guest host. Today, we are going to be speaking to a TTRPG map enthusiast, an advocator and patron saint for collaborative accessible knowledge, a man who is hard to find enough info on the internet for an introduction, and I did just have to take one piece out of it with some breaking news. Jorm, co-founder of the VTT platform Diceweaver. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day here where I am. I'm in Walnut Creek right now, California, and I'm staring down at a golf course, and the people here cannot play golf at all, but it's not really, a thing that I worry about.
Awesome.
It's been an interesting month for me because my wife and I are currently in the process of moving from Honolulu, Hawaii, and ultimately to Portland, Oregon. But if you've ever moved across an ocean, it's not a thing that you can just do. It takes...
You have to imagine the trucks are pretty expensive to get across the ocean.
Surprisingly, that's actually one of the cheaper parts. That's only about $4,500 to rent a container, and then they fill it and then they put it in.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think that is quite the topic for today, as much as people are going to be mad at me for moving on.
No.
Let's start off with a really weird way to ask a very basic question. Aliens come down and start doing their worldwide human census. They're here in peace. They just need to do a census.
Okay.
They come to your door and ask who you are and what you do. What is your answer?
That's a pretty good question. I'm a wizard. I write spells, and they make little bits of computer stuff turn one direction or the other, depending upon whatever. But ultimately, my goal is I like to think about like making information, like you said earlier, I'm big about information accessibility and stuff. And this is something that I've been doing like almost my entire life to some degree or another. My mother was a teacher, and so that sort of like inflicted itself upon me in some way or another. I've done my own teaching and stuff, but the work I choose to do, the people I work for, the things that I do, it's usually about like trying to create community and collaboration and to make knowledge accessible to as many people as possible. Because ultimately, and we're drifting off the VTT and the TTRPG things here. Well, they do come full circle in a weird way, but ultimately my goal is to try to improve our society and the state of discourse between human beings and so forth in a way that helps us as a species, because I ultimately believe that education is the silver bullet, right? I think that fixes everything we got going on. And the biggest problems that we have is like, for all we know, that the cure of cancer is like locked in the brain of some young girl in Mumbai, India, who's never going to find it. She has to find us. We can't find her, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like rising the tide, lifting the floor helps everybody. Rising tides lift all boats.
Absolutely.
So, that's been my thing. And to bring it back to Diceweaver is actually built on a piece of technology, or not a piece of technology, a huge system of technology that I originally designed for use on Wikipedia, which is... that's the goal of Wikipedia is to share the sum of human knowledge to everyone in the world for free. But, it was a gigantic workflow engine that can be user editable, click together pieces like Legos, and ultimately works in any language that you want it to. So that was kind of the goal there. Wikipedia has some very complicated user cases, workflows. And so to design something for that, well, I have this piece of tech. And after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, I'm like, well, I'm not a fan of any of the VTTs that we played with. So what am I going to do? Well, I know how to write this stuff. I have half the pieces already built. I've built a map editor. I've built these things. So it's like, put it all together. And then I have a use for this technology that I've designed. And here we are. Well, not quite as easy as that, but...
Or yeah, here you are on the path.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really put together that the way that Wikipedia is put together could actually be useful. But as soon as you kind of explain it, it makes total sense that so many programs that are related to tabletop are essentially just trying to find a better way to access and store and find information. So it makes perfect sense. which leads into my next question, which I always try to ask just so that the audience has an easier time, I think, like locking in and listening. Can you tell them, and it can be short and sweet, why you are worth listening to on this topic?
About VTTs, well, okay, so I'll give you all the answers there because there's a bunch of stuff. First off, when it comes to information accessibility, communications, and collaboration and community construction, I've been doing that professionally since 1994 in some degree or another. I've been designing and building games as long as that, like, so the VTT thing, the Dungeons and Dragons side of it, the role playing side of it, that is kind of in a way like a newish kind of focus on my end. But I have been playing RPGs since 1979, and I played a lot of them. So it's a big hobby of mine. It's one that I love. I don't want to say that that's anything that you should listen to me for, because like we're all in that sort of same boat. But I was the senior designer for Wikipedia for many, many years. That is the entire focus of, that again is the big thing of like, trying to make information accessible. I've designed communities for very large ones and very small ones. I have very strong opinions about them. I've given talks about community design and management on 4 continents. I built a very successful browser-based multiplayer game that it developed its own fairly large community at one point, which actually is one of the purposes behind this other thing that we're going to be doing called an MMORPG engine. So I've just really been thinking about it for a very long time. I have a lot of experience designing for communities and building that. And RPG systems are communities. Like, let's be clear. If you have any more than 2 people on a thing, you have a community. If you have 2 people, you have politics. With 3, you have a community. And all games are a series of workflows. Workflows require community built in. Community, even just talking back and forth, this is a workflow. And I would argue that based on what I've done in my life, I am maybe not the most expert, but I'm a very big name in designing workflows and managing this sort of a thing. Developing stakeholder buy-in from 50,000 people who speak a completely different language than me is a difficult thing to do, and you have to think about things in that way. So that would be why I'm humble.
Exactly. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
I put "don't be humble" at the end of the question, but I figured he's got it. On top of that, I mean, frankly, me to the audience here, I know for a fact that all of us like have 10 Wikipedia browsers open at once when we're working on our stuff. So you have some thanks to give here, which you can do just by opening your ears. Let's get into talking about Diceweaver. I wanted to start with a question that a friend kind of asked me when I told them about this interview coming up. And I looked up to get some basic info. I found a comprehensive list, in quotes, of VTTs on startplaying.com.
Yeah.
There were 17 different options.
Yeah.
What drove you to add to that list?
Okay, so first off, let's be clear. Start Playing is not the whole thing. I just want to point this out. Start Playing has a very I'm not allowed on Start Playing right now for whatever reason. They have like a list of things and like, oh, go put it on, add your name to our GitHub repository and maybe we'll talk to you. It's kind of like, So what drove me to do that? I have had a weekly game since 1995. And it's obviously changed. It's changed days. It's changed the cast. It's over time. But when the pandemic happened, like everybody else, we had to figure out a way to do that. And so there were 3 of us in the group, and we all went to we picked a different option. Which at the time there were really only 3, right? It was Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, and Foundry.
Yeah.
And so the answers to that go like this. Like we looked at each one of them, we played around with some of them, and we came down to the following. First off, Fantasy Grounds was D&D specific, and at that point in time we were playing Rogue Traders, so that goodbye.
Yep.
Foundry required me to do a bunch of stuff that the computer scientist and wizard in me caused my skin to crawl, like open ports on my firewall so that people could, so we were just not going to do that. I'm the guy who writes this sort of software. I would never let myself use it, if that makes sense. So that left us with Roll20. So we're using Roll20, and we found it extremely frustrating and just really terrible to use from a user input side. And no shade to the developers there, okay? Because one thing I've learned is that you make the best decision that you can make given the information that you have. And, there'd be things like where, okay, it's Josh's turn to play. It's his turn to go. Well, what's Josh done? He has opened his character sheet. First off, he spent like 10 minutes trying to find his character sheet from this sidebar thing. Opened it up. It's now full screen. So that's problematic because he can't use it. He can't use the rest of the thing. So he double clicks the top of it. So it swoops down. And then now it's still in the way. So he moves it over to the side. And then what happens is that it goes translucent. Okay, so now he wants to use this game. So now he's got to go find it. He's got to move it back up. He's got to double click it to open it. He's then got to scroll down to find the weapon that he's going to use and click the button. And all of this is just really frustrating because my experience of it is to just hear him go, making this sound. Terrible experience. Why can't I just create a goblin or a monster? I have to create tokens. I have to do this. Like there's this whole thing of like that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. How come initiative is not something that's automatically calculated? How come things that computers can do really well? And then, ultimately I thought like, well, I can do this, right? I mean, I make maps. I mean, I love maps. I make maps a lot of time. That's like my hobby. And part of the deal with that was that I made like a bunch of different little map browser things so that we could do that. And then for like my various games, I built little things. Like I built a little wiki so that we could keep track of the stories and the open quests. And I'd written a various other pieces of software that could just be like sort of linked together. So we started playing with those pieces. And then I was like, I need to make accounts so that I can do that. I'm a wizard. I can do anything I want. So I spun that up. And at first it was just us. But then after some point, somebody was like, you need to actually productize this. And I was like, okay, so I will. So I did. I took the approach that is different. I think that most designers of these types of things attempt to emulate the user interface of the real game, and the user interface for an RPG is a piece of paper with a bunch of writing on it.
Right.
And one of the beauties of using computers is that you don't have to do that. Without going into like the whole design principles about like, attempting to emulate existing technology and, and metaphors so the users understand like what's a desktop and why does the camera click when you press the button?
Right.
The psychology behind that, we know a character sheet is actually a terrible interface if you know anything about what you're doing. So I decided that what I wanted to do was create a system where I studied how people actually interact with their characters, with their dice, with the maps, with documents. And so I designed Diceweaver around this idea of like, there's two kinds of ways that you interact with information. Either what we call a modal mode, where you're looking directly at it. It's the only thing you're doing, right? In which case it's perfectly fine for a document or something else to take up the whole screen. Or you're doing hunt and peck. I'm going to click the weapon button, which means that I already have like, mental wayfinding to know I want to go to my weapons tab and then click that open and then scroll and find that one weapon and bam, click it.
Like we're playing NetHack.
Yeah, like you're playing NetHack, like a video game. Video games do this really well. So let's take a lot of that information, that research, that study, and put it into a way to play these types of games. And then other things were like, let's take advantage of the fact that we can do automated things. Like, why do you have to like ever roll initiative? You should never have to do that, because it's like once you pull somebody once you drop a token onto the map, it should just do it for you. It should know how to do that. Well, I mean, most of the VTTs don't do that. Most VTTs only care about two games, right? That's Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, which is effectively Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And some of them will be like, okay, Call of Cthulhu, or they'll do whatever, like the bigger name games. But at the end of the day, a lot of them don't actually get into the nitty gritty of that. They give you a character sheet that you can fill out, and then like a dice macro that you can write. And maybe they give it to you in the VTT. And that I mean, a lot of those have changed. They've gotten better at it and whatnot. But the fact is that one of the values that I have, or that Diceweaver brings to it, is that is just part of the system. We're just designing a workflow. It's not entirely Turing complete macro language that defines how this works. So we're capable of doing things like in the Alien game. You roll your dice, and if you fail, you can take a stress point and re-roll certain parts of the die pool. All the failures, you can re-roll them. But you have to add a stress point first, and then that changes your die. So that's actually a complicated workflow. No problem, man. That works perfectly. that was like 2 lines of code for me. So that is the thing I like to do. And I wanted to focus on games that are not the ampersand. Wizards of the Coast does not need my help.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would argue that Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons is actually a completely different industry than everybody else here is in. We're in the RPG industry. They're in the high-end intellectual property asset management industry. They have AAA movies being made about their IP. So it's more of an entertainment thing than it is is in this industry that we're in. And I mean, we can definitely talk about that sort of thing all day long. But the fact of the matter is that, well, I used to say I was never going to be able to compete with Wizards of the Coast when they were coming out with their own VTT. Like, how am I going to compete with that? I can't, right? Well, apparently I can, because they're not.
Right.
But I'm not going to be able to give you a better experience for Dungeons and Dragons than D&D Beyond. Part of that is because I don't want to spend that much resources on a singular game, but also they won't license to me. They won't license to anybody. Anybody who has a licensed D&D product that can put product on their marketplace or put product in their D&D product in their VTT, they're legacy licenses, or they are paying out the nose, or they are being completely screwed. Which brings me to another thing too, right? I mean, in a way, a lot of my design or my business acumen or my business decisions, the plans that I want to make about this come from the fact that I don't want to do what Wizards of the Coast does, right? You want to play D&D online, you have to buy a copy of the physical copy of the player's handbook, because they don't sell you a digital one, or at least you have to buy a physical copy. So what's that run? $50?
Around there, yeah.
Depends on where you are, what you are. So that's a chunk of cash. But then if you actually want to play it online, now you have to buy the same book again on D&D Beyond. And if you're the storyteller or whatever, you may have to buy it yet again on whatever VTT that you're using at. So now you've paid $180 just to play the game. I don't know about you, but I bought the White Album like 6 times, and I felt like that was kind of a little bit more than I needed to. So we were like, how do we accomplish this? And you know what, man, let's just honor people's purchases. If we have the product in our store, if we have the product in our library, and you've bought it, man, I'm not going to charge you again for it, because that's just kind of evil. I think that's kind of crap, and it leaves up to that. It's like, because I think customer service is a huge part of that. And I think, honestly, that the publisher side of this sort of coin, the VTT coin, has two as a developer of VTTs, I have two kinds of customers. I have players and I have the publishers, the people who put games on the platform. And I think that the publishers are completely underserved. I think y'all are way underserved. And from a business standpoint, even though my personal ethics, my desire as a person to say, like, let's make it easier for you to put your business, your game out there. Let's expose more people to it. Let's see these good ideas. Even though that's my personal ethics, from a business standpoint, it makes sense, because if I make you happy, right, then you will tell your people, like your players, like, hey, yeah, it's up on Diceweaver. We think that Diceweaver is great. Go play there. And then I give players enough incentives to continue there, to buy a subscription, to buy product through the marketplace, to even put their own stuff on market. And that's kind of the basics behind the plan. That is the plan, my Cylon plan.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're heading right where I was hoping to go, which is Here, obviously, the audience for this talk is the publishing, the writing side, the people who make stuff and want to give it to people. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just like a brief scan of the kind of policy decisions, mission statement, whatever you want to call it. I saw you've got public rates as far as the percent that you want to take from someone who is hosting on your platform. You're honoring purchases, which I think just overall gets more people to at least make the switch, which can benefit, if we're getting a better rate and you help them switch to the website we're getting a better rate on, then that obviously feeds back into us. If you want to kind of go more into how that works, what that looks like, if I'm approaching you trying to get my game onto your platform. Okay.
So I'm just, we're business people, right? So I'm not going to try to gas you with a bunch of like, oh, it's to your, No, a lot of these are, while it's going to be good, and I think it's good, I think it's fair and equitable, I think it's all good. I think part of it is also, it's very much, what's my goal? Market acquisition, right? So market acquisition is very tough when you have like some gorillas in the room, So what I do is I need to do two things. I need to make it as easy as possible for players to come over, and I need to make it as easy as possible for publishers to come over. The big weight. So let's talk about the player thing. I'm not going to talk about the player thing, right? Because that solves itself if I solve the publisher problem, or at least that's my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't think so. But if I make it easy for publishers to come, then they move their product, and then you guys do advertising for me in many ways, right? I don't got a budget for marketing. I just don't. I mean, it's like we're, mom and pop store here. No kids, but mom and pop. So I make it easy because it's my job to make a VTT. It's not your job to make a VTT. Your job is to make a game. Your job is to write the stuff. You make. I'm not going to make PDFs for you, but your job is to make the PDF. Your job is to give a shit about that. Your job is to care that the product is actually put out in the way that you want it to be put out there, that the experience is good for you. It's my job to make that experience. So where this whole industry is kind of screwed and where you get underserved is because you go to Foundry or you go to Roll20 and they'll go like, well, we'll hook you up with somebody else who will build this for you. And now you can go pay them $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever. Like it's just built into that whole thing. I'm not going to do that because it needs to be made as easy as possible for you to build a game on my platform. So we'll just do it. You sign the license with us. You give me the ability to use your intellectual property, and we'll do it. Because first off, it's going to be like way faster for me to do it, right? Because you're not going to want to learn even if you know how to program. Learning a new language just sucks. Learning, like spending a lot of time doing the like, oh, how does this work? How does this not work? That's gonna be terrible. There's a bunch of things like that. So we'll just do it. The second part of that is that, you may have a mechanic in your game that we don't support. Well, that sucks for you, right? Doesn't suck for me though, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement that mechanic, because why not? It's going to be, again, faster for me to do it because I'm just going to have access directly to the code base. The second part of that is that, I have now improved my product overall. So you're like, oh, I use this specialized randomization mechanism, or I've got a new kind of oracle or something along those lines. I'm going to implement it. Now I've got it, and we can make that with your games going forward, or we can do whatever. An example is, have you played Paragon or Aegon or Deathmatch Island or any of those, right?
No, I haven't.
They're Evil Hat games. They're really great, but they have a very specific kind of dice mechanism pool system that's it's kind of clever. And so I was like, man, these are kind of cool, but I want to make them the right way. So I implemented a whole kind of dice chaining system, like a widget for that. So it works out really well for them. And I now have this dice chain widget that I can use for other things. And in doing so, I also made it super easy for Paragon games to get implemented on the platform. They're not released yet. I have to get final approval, but they're coming like next week or something like that. That's another thing, approval. We go through a whole thing. We design your game. We talk about what does that mean. What are the parts that you want to include? What are the parts you don't want to include? And then you get to approve it or deny it, or you can be as involved or uninvolved as you want. And before it goes live, getting a game for that, there's two parts of it. One is the VTT side. And that's the one I'm really just talking about right now. And in that case, there's a license agreement that we need you to sign. And it's basically is just like it licenses your IP to us to use. The terms of it are very simple. It lasts for a year and then it auto renews. So we don't have to keep signing it. It is for the company and not for the product. So we, if you've got like a library of like 6 games, the license covers all of them, as opposed to like we have to write 6 different licenses. That does not by any stretch like tell you that like I'm just going to implement all 6 games. You're going to tell me what you want to do, that sort of thing. The license can be canceled at any time by either party, and it revokes immediately. With the one exception is that I have a 30-day window in which time to remove your stuff from the platform, and that is basically my vacation clause, right? Like I'm on vacation, I can't do it today. However, it's really like a 10-second operation to turn a game on or turn a game off. So then we can also do, the license itself is it gives us the ability to like use the content for the VTT, to create the VTT thing, use your logo, your images from the rule book, and to create posts on social media, about it, what's called commercialization, which is, the legal term basically means that we can make a commercial out of it. But otherwise, there's no money on that at all. No money changes hands. It's just the IP. We don't pay you. You don't pay us. That's the end of that. We can add specializations and carve-outs. So, for instance, our license with Pinnacle says we can use Savage Worlds, but not Savage Worlds of Flash Gordon, for instance, or Deadlands. Deadlands is also on a weird schedule thing. And then you can also add specialized requirements. Again, Pinnacle has a very specific way that you have to credit people in their game. So we have to include that sort of thing. And then this is all just, easy peasy stuff.
Totally. So it sounds like in general, kind of your focus is literally meeting the people who are part of this industry and saying, how can I make your job easier or make your thing sell better or however, and kind of make the ground level that more indies can kind of build off of. Would you say that's accurate?
That is kind of the goal. Yeah. Ultimately to make that happen faster and better. I am trying to build tools to make that more automated. I'm trying to set us into a place where, if you've got a game that you want to play test, we can spin up a playtest server, or not a server, but playtest games that are private and hidden, and you can just do that, beta test, that sort of thing. But it's like kind of like what happens with the need of the publisher in many ways.
Absolutely. This is a quick one. What's the weirdest request that you've had so far for just the publisher saying the game has to work that way? Is there anything interesting there?
Yeah, I mean, none of them are. I wouldn't call any of them weird. Evil Hat is a really fun group of people to work with, but they have, they want their games to play a certain way, and I get it. But sometimes it's like, oh, I can't quite do that yet, right? I don't have a facility for one of the Fate games is awaiting a piece of technology that I have to write. And so it's not that these requests are weird. It's more that they are pushing the boundaries of what I had immediately available. And I want to do all of them. It's just, it's a priority thing.
Yeah. You're kind of opening the door for publishers to say, hey, I've actually needed the VTT to do this whole time and none of them do.
Yeah.
Which, because none of them listen to us, why would anyone have voiced it yet?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I have had different experiences with different publishers. There are publishers who have been, deeply into the business as we go along. Again, like Evil Hat, like I said, they are very interested in this sort of stuff. And I think, it's great. And then I've had ones who just need me to load it up and show it to them for 5 minutes and just go okay. I have a relationship with one publisher who I did that with for 5 games. And then after that, they're just whatever, I don't care. Just put it up there, because they don't need it because they trust me on it. And then I've had ones who just did not care at all. And that's fine. That's your business. You can do what you want. I'm not going to name any names on that, by the way.
No, for sure.
I like it in a weird way because I get to learn. I read more game systems in a week than I ever read in my entire life before I started this system.
It's incredible what a requirement for work will do to your reading.
Yeah. And the sad thing is that I a lot of times have to skip over a lot of the cool lore, which I think sucks. Because
you don't need to implement that.
I don't need to implement that. I need to sometimes implement a weird third phase for a monster, but I don't need to think about it.
Which, I mean, I think that's also kind of a good sign that the stuff that's already perfectly handled is the writing, and all that we need you to take care of is the tech part of it, which exists outside of kind of the position. So there are some writing things that can be handled better in tech too. Tell me about that. That's one of the things, right? Is I've been trying to implement, again, the Wikipedia thing. I'm designing document styles and so forth. So we are implementing effectively a full-fledged wiki, but individual games at this point don't need it, right? They need documents, and they need documents of specific kinds. They need to be able to support PDFs. They need to be able to support scratch pads, little, rich text documents. Then we have that by default, there are Diceweaver supports what are called structured documents. And so you play a game, like a space game, and they have a planet sheet, so it's just some predefined sort of layout for this sort of thing. We do that all the time. So when it comes to specific games, I have
one of the games, it's in Kickstarter, or it's not finished their Kickstarter. They're in post Kickstarter development. What they want to do is they want to, put it on the marketplace, and then when you buy it, you get like the full PDF, but then you also get each chapter as its own PDF, right? And so the intent then is that they can deploy specific chapters to the tabletop so that players can see the like how to create a character. Here's the weapons chapter, here's the rules chapter, but they don't get the monsters chapter, and they don't get the like lore chapter, they don't get the maps chapters or whatever.
Very cool. So a faster version of like printouts.
Yeah, it's that's kind of the point, right? Is to be able to do that sort of thing. Make it faster, make it easier, make it, put it on your phone. You're sitting around the desktop. Maybe, that's the other thing too, is that we're sort of trying to design for an aid that you can have, even if you're sitting at a table together. Here's your character sheet. You don't, Jane forgot her sheet at home. She forgets her sheet at home every time, and everybody has forgotten what her strength score is. But somehow it's always 17. Well, it's right there. It's on Diceweaver. We just want to make it easier for people to do that.
Yeah, and I also saw a couple things on the roadmap that were intriguing to me. I saw that you wanted to offer some form of localization. Is that something that you would have the functionality for if it is localized, or you would be helping facilitate that?
I speak English and a little bit of Latin. Well, I was National Latin Exam gold medalist, and I speak California Spanish and Hawaiian. None of those are useful in this regard, so I don't speak the language. But the functionality for localization absolutely exists. Diceweaver was built with localization in mind from zero. You'll hear people talk about like when you do design things, you need to do it mobile first, and I've never found that to be true. What I have found to be true is that if you design for localization first, you are saving yourself a huge headache. And again, Wikipedia is in 600 languages, so that since you have to think in that mindset, I'm already there. I'm already like, okay, well, here's what's going to happen when this gets translated to French, or when it gets put into a right to left language as opposed to this type of thing. So it is there. There are tools for it where my friend Tag and I have been working on ways to make that faster and better, but it's not really a thing that we've really focused on, because it's not, again, something that like people have asked for, right? Each game has a dictionary, and we can put any language into it, but it also turns out that most people who do this are just fine with just the English version. So
cool. Yeah, I mean, if that's the offer on either side, then the smoother one's going to be the ticket anyways.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, especially, when it comes to why it would be valuable for publishers to be on your platform? Is there anything we haven't got to talk about that you would like to bring up?
I think that ultimately the fact is that you have direct access to the core development, and I'm operating from a position of it's in my best interest to provide as much customer service as I can in this way of doing it. So I don't think you get that anywhere else. I mean, I can talk about like, well, we're only taking 20% off the marketplace as opposed to the 30 or 35% that you get everywhere else. I can talk about all these little things like that, like the here's the incentives for players to continue to come to us is this, and but at the end of the day, I think it is going to be the personalized attention. I think.
Awesome.
Because my fate is tied to that. I have a very strong motivation to make it work.
And as you move forward, obviously, something that any company has to kind of deal with is the scaling of the personalization. Is that something that you have a plan for of moving forward, how we would continue to have that access?
Yeah. The scaling is like, well, first off, like implementing a game. I mean, honestly, once you understand the basics of building the game, it's not a secret. It's not a 10th level spell. It is that. So there are a couple juniors that I work with. Like I call them juniors. They're junior developers really, and they understand it. They know how to put it together. And they will, from time to time, I kick them down like, hey, can you build the catalogs for this, or can you do that, or whatever? It's because I'm swamped. So there's a plan for how to pull that off. At this point, we've gotten to the point where implementing a specific game can take about 2 days of effort.
Wow, very nice.
It depends. Yeah. there's a lot of cut and pasting. There's ways that you can make it easier as a producer. Again, like, I keep mentioning Evil Hat, but like they gave me access to their asset library. And, that's just this gigantic, like 100 some odd gigabyte repository of art and, rule books, Illustrator files, and that sort of thing. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad, right? Sometimes it's overwhelming. So, it just depends.
Absolutely.
We try to do everything. We treat everybody as a snowflake. Everybody's a unique snowflake.
Beautiful. I have a quick question that we got off of socials that I want to get in front of you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Someone was asking, is there bundling or royalty sharing for titles?
So that is a feature that has been asked for. It's actually like on the roadmap. The marketplace right now is in a pilot mode. So, I'm going to be honest, this is not fully featured there. Like there are a bunch of features in the marketplace that we want to add. Some of them we've already got like designed and implemented, but each one of them we want to do with intentionality. So royalty sharing is something we can do, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it. I don't know if you've ever worked with Stripe on the mechanical level, like on the deep, like core level, but it can be daunting.
Yeah,
I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And then the other problem with that is that you start working with live ammunition really quick. And, it's tough to you don't want to deploy something that is going to accidentally not work. So bundling is in the same process, because until you have royalty sharing, there's really no point in building bundling, right? Like I could build a system that allowed you to bundle up with a bunch of other stuff, but without doing that, at any rate, they're on the list. They're actually, I guess this question actually will end up moving it higher on the list, because this will now be the third person that specifically asked for it.
Perfect.
And so that's a lot of how things get prioritized. The more something gets asked for, the more likely it is to go up to the top of it.
As it should be. Yeah, and I've seen that another thing, which is kind of a dead horse topic in tabletop, but is always worth mentioning, is it sounds like you are big on getting feedback and communicating with how people are experiencing the app and that sort of thing.
Yeah, man. Well, I'd be a really terrible designer if I didn't. Right.
Yeah.
I have a way that I think something should work, and I've been proven wrong as many times as I've been proven right. And you know what? It's sometimes you got to pivot, or you got the idea wrong, or you want to. My idea of what the focus is more important than other things like that. A good example is of a feature for that is lighting, like automatic lighting in the tabletop, and everybody loves it because it looks sexy. It looks really cool. I've never met a single person who really actually uses it. Like not one. And people, I've used Fog of War from time to time, but Fog of War is a pain in the ass. It's really a pain in the ass to use. And I think anybody who's actually ever done it will agree. So it's like more often than not, people end up using more theater of the mind than they use battle maps, and I think that this is just understanding the way people play these games. And of course, if you provide the tools, people will use that. But there's a bias that's inherent in the way that people use your product by what you focus on and what you push forward. We wanted to make something super fast. You can create an encounter from dropping a map in to dropping tokens onto it in less than 30 seconds. I've timed it. Drag a map off because everything's drag and drop, right? Drag a map into the screen. It's created a map. Now drag your tokens out from the monsters. Dun, 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 done. And they're fully realized, right? This is it's like, why build a VTT? I want to build a better VTT, right? You drop a goblin on the screen. That's a real goblin. He's his own person. He's his own thing. And deleting the other goblins doesn't affect him. He's got his own inventory. He's got his own hit points. So, that's kind of the way that works. We just never found Fog of War to be useful.
Fair enough. And if it becomes super useful later for whatever reason, you can always adapt.
Yeah. If people people go can we make this change to this character sheet? Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Take me, about an hour and a half to do it before I can deploy it, or something like that. The more people want a feature, the more likely it is to go in. I just don't want to spend time working on stuff that nobody wants to use.
Fair enough.
I want to make things easier, not more complicated.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big topic lately, especially, is realizing not just how can you make prep or game time better, but also just more efficient, faster, realizing that everything doesn't have to be 100% effort all of the time. So anything that
Yeah,
focuses on that just kind of ease of like, can I just throw a game together and let that process be as fun as possible, or at least as streamlined to get to the fun part?
right. When I was in my 20s and single, and I had all the time in the world to design an adventure and draw maps and do all this other stuff. I'm in my 50s now, and I'm married, and I'm moving, and I got all this, I don't have the time for that. So it's just much easier for me to just prep, make it faster.
Awesome.
So that's kind of the hope.
Love to hear it. One last question, and if you don't have too much insight on this one, that is totally fine, but we try to give little chunks of practical tips for our folks here. Because you've been on the other side of designing a marketplace for tabletop products, is there any insight you can give as to how you can make your products stick out in a virtual marketplace?
First thing is, don't put your product on a marketplace that allows AI product, because no matter what, you're going to get drowned in that slop. You can see this kind of a thing with video game marketplaces, Steam or Xbox or whatever, right? The ones that actually do kind of like a real product curation system versus the one that just allow anything on there have a completely different experience. And you are going to be far more likely to find a game on, say, the Xbox marketplace to have your game be seen on the Xbox marketplace than on Steam. You just are, because volume is a big part of that. This is, by the way, one of the axis is that I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to figure out a way to allow for this to be democratized. I don't want to have a situation where a big game company can buy all the promo space, right? We want to, you need to be able to do cross sales. We need to be able to do cross promotions. I do not want to have a situation where, I don't think you want to have a situation where somebody goes to your product page and gets upselled on another company's product,
Right.
which happens a lot of places, right? I'm not going to name any names. But I think that's crap. I think it's just terrible business marketing. I think that we have the idea of promo, and you want to put your product out there. If I'm not going to take your advertising money, how do I enable that? How do I make that work? We've got some ideas. So that's one thing. I have like some opinions about, in general, eye-catching stuff, marketplace stuff. I think that adding screenshots sometimes in a VTT, if you're selling for a VTT, can help. Here's what it looks like in play. I think that's not necessarily going to be the best solution in Diceweaver, because every game's going to end up like, oh, it's on Diceweaver.
Right.
Obviously, you have to grab their opinion from the list, and then you have to grab their attention on the profile of the product. I like bright, garish colors. I think that certain kinds of color is important. I think actually, if I have one piece of advice, it would be to use color. Nobody does. They all make it look brown, and they all make it look gray. It's kind of like video game dystopian.
Or the half blue, half orange.
Yeah. Like those are really good looking, half blue, half orange. Oh yeah, you understand primary colors. Congrats. But I think that not being afraid of color is a big thing. Like, look, Super Mario, man. People like playing Super Mario because it's bright, it's green, it's there's grass. Here's a piece of Wikipedia advice. Thing that we learned. Every year they do these banners, right? Donate money to Wikipedia. And I was on the banner once. We discovered through, A/B testing that the color green, gets people's attention and causes them to spend money more than any other color.
Interesting.
So use green, not like dark greens, not like dark greens, but like grass, tree, healthy greens. That's a piece of wisdom that I don't know that people actually talk about.
Very cool.
Psychologically, it makes a lot of sense because it reminds people of water.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for all of your insight here. Is there anything else that you would like to mention, shout out, talk about, scream?
No, I'm really happy to have been here and have done this. This is a lot of fun for me. I just like, I like talking about this stuff. Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Absolutely.
I'm a big nerd. I could talk for 20 years on design principles and whatnot. But otherwise, I'm good. Getting in touch with me is easy. And I will talk to everybody.
Sounds good.
If you want demo, let me know. If you want the talk, let me know. We're all good.
All right. Well, y'all heard the man, diceweaver.com. You can speak directly to them and get your game up there, get some help, see what other people are doing. It's worth at least giving a quick little check. That has been another successful RT talk. Thanks for coming, everyone. And remember that a rising tide lifts all ships. Later, y'all.
Later.